to
What a dark
take this
human
job
being.
seriously.
Dark human
What was it
being.
at?
I remember when churches emptied,
What was the catalyst? Was there something?
and I used to rub them along the stone walls, right? And until they bled.
And they used to beat up the Tibetan kids that were fishing down by the river, saying, no, you should not be fishing for sport.
And nobody's ever heard of it, but it's almost, it's half the population of Ireland.
Yeah. What's up, everyone? Coming at you from Chongqing in China. I'm with my good friend Eoin here, and we're going to talk about religion, religious issues in the U.S. in terms of being in the public school system, your experiences back in Ireland, maybe some of my experiences, and of course, because we've been living in China for so long, we're going to talk about religious issues in China. Welcome to the show, first of all, Eoin.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Nice to be here.
Yeah, now we're going to do things a little bit different. I'm going to give you a bit more of an introduction afterwards so we can just get right into this topic. So why are we talking about this? I shared a video with Eoin where I was kind of surprised. It was somebody talking about religion in school and bringing prayer back. And there was a woman, I should have probably looked up her information beforehand. I'd imagine she's from the Board of Education or something along the lines of that, definitely involved in running schools. And she was saying that she didn't want prayer to be in school. And David Petrick, do you know his name? Something like that. Yeah. He was doing a commentary and he couldn't believe what she was saying. And I thought, surely the comments are going to have a bit more common sense. And I was wrong. So let's start things off, first of all, by watching the video. And then we'll take it from there. All right, here we go.
How much prayer do you need? How much God do you need? We say under God, we say it. Why do we need to say more? Everyone who's sitting here still now are professionals. They come to work to dedicate their lives to children. They didn't come here to pray with you. If you want to pray with them, take them to church. But not on my time, not on their time, and not in this community's time. We're not in this business. This is not the time or the place. I don't know why you need prayer to take this job seriously.
Dark human
Was it at North Carolina? Wow. But this is again why so many parents are finding each other, because that lady, she probably doesn't have kids, but she wants to raise your kids. Man, this is a tough one to watch.
You know, when he first of all started saying, wow, I thought he was going to be like, she's got a point. You know, she's got a point. And you know, maybe she's a little bit abrasive.
Yeah.
But it's like, okay, all right, that sounds kind of reasonable. And then he went totally in the opposite direction and said she doesn't have kids, which is irrelevant, and she wants to take care of your kids. It sounds like that's her job to begin with. I don't know if you want to add something before we get into the comments.
Well, I like exactly what you said. When he went, wow, I thought he was going to commend her on her abrasiveness, because that's the sort of attitude that I want somebody in management to take. If somebody is trying to force or put religion into a school, I want someone in management somewhere to just go, no.
Right.
To just be abrasive and just go, no, stop it. Get it away from, like...
Yeah, there are places of worship. And there are places to receive an education.
Yeah.
This is a place where you're supposed to receive an education. Now, somebody might argue and say, okay, well, they're getting an education in religious, materials or whatever it is.
Yeah.
It's like, no, you're practicing the religion. That's totally different.
Yeah.
And so let's talk about some of the comments, because, again, so it's kind of a double whammy. First of all, he says, wow. And then he goes in the completely opposite direction. And then I think there's got to be some voices of reason in the comments.
Yeah.
And then I open up the comments. And so here we go. Let's see here. Yeah, that is the problem with these people. We need God and prayers all the time. God is good all the time. Please, dear Lord, help these poor lost souls. Please keep them away from our children and our politics until they see the light again. She's the poster child of why you need prayer and more of it.
You're literally just reading all the comments,
the top comments.
The top comments, 1, 2, 3.
You know, this is, again, it's not about an education in religion, because you can be sure that all of these exact same people, if they were watching a video of somebody saying we don't need our kids reading, verses from the Quran,
Yeah.
they'd all be celebrating it.
Yeah.
This is all about picking a specific religion and saying, no, we want our kids in school to practice this.
Yeah.
When school is supposed to be this place where you receive a practical education.
Well, in an ideal world, it would be, but I suppose coming from Ireland, I don't know if anybody out there knows a lot about Ireland, but the majority of schools in Ireland, primary schools, are denominational. They're not secular,
Right.
and it's a massive majority. There is a time and a place for religion, but it's not when you're standing in front of a child, because numerous studies from all over the world, they've all identified that when children are young, when they're in primary school, they're vulnerable. They're vulnerable, and when I say that, I don't mean that in the way that, oh, somebody's going to attack them. I mean that they're impressionable. Vulnerable is just the wording that the most recent study that I read. They're impressionable, and they'll suck up anything that somebody in a position of authority tells them. So if we put their own, like a particular religion in front of an 8-year-old child, and if we tell an 8-year-old child that Santa's going to give them a present for Christmas, they're going to believe it.
Right.
That's just what they do. That's what children do. They don't have the capacity for rational thought just yet. And when you tell a kid that Santa isn't real, it's shocking. It's like, oh, the world collapses. But I'm not comparing religion to Santa Claus.
Right.
Regardless of what my beliefs are or what your beliefs are or anything like that, if you take a child and you put them in a classroom and you say, okay, God is real, and
This particular God is real.
this
importantly.
particular God is real,
Yeah.
and this is how we worship this particular God, and this is the particular catechism that we believe. This is the particular method of worship that we partake in, and then nobody ever tells them that it might be something else.
Right. Exactly. Because that's what this is about. This is about people pushing one specific religion.
Yeah.
And you're right. They're impressionable. And it's not like it's the kids exploring this on their own. It's being forced upon them. If they're saying, like the comments, God all the time, praying all the time.
Yeah.
In my situation where my eldest had a best friend in school when he was younger from the Philippines, and they're quite religious there. And my son's friend was talking to him about God all the time. And my son was kind of believing some of it, and I didn't mind. I didn't mind. I was like, I gave him some kind of counterpoints. I didn't want to guide him away from it. I said, this is a good environment to explore it in.
Yeah.
You talk to him about it. You see if you can find any flaws in what he says or find any connections in what he says, and you make up your mind for yourself. But what they're talking about is totally different. It's about putting it in place in the system and saying, this is real. This is what you need to believe. This is the way we need to go.
Yeah.
And I bet you, sorry, did you want to add something?
Well, I just wanted to, the thing I wanted to add to that is, they're putting it forward from one perspective. And obviously this guy, American, will make an assumption and assume that he is some denomination of Christian, right? And so he believes in the primacy of Christianity, whatever denomination of Christianity that is. He wants Christianity put forward to these children so they can continue the thought process that maybe he was given out as he was a child.
So him in particular, I'll make one note though. He in particular he's from Iran.
Yeah.
So I don't know if it doesn't necessarily mean he wasn't
Doesn't
Christian.
necessarily mean,
but I don't know exactly what his backstory is. But I know that he's gone full on pro-West everything. Pro-intervention.
Yeah.
Like he's very stereotypical.
Yeah.
So
But the point still stands.
Right.
It stands whether it's Hindu or Muslim or Shinto. The point still stands that this man just wants to be proven right. This man wants he wants to see people who share his belief system and the number of people who share his belief system expanded.
Right.
Right? And whether he's doing that from a place of honesty or a place of dishonesty that's up for debate. All right. But regardless of why he wants more people to believe the way he believes, it's manipulative.
Right.
It's manipulative because we are talking about vulnerable members of society who will grow up and will take this particular perspective. What you're saying with your son, I was baptized, right? I was baptized, but I never took I'm Irish.
Yeah.
Majority of people in Ireland are assumed to be Catholic. Most people don't practice. They claim to be Catholic, right? But they don't practice it. They don't go to church. I remember when churches emptied. Like, this was within my lifetime, churches emptied. It went from 6 masses on a Sunday to 1 mass, 2 masses maybe, and it was just full of old people.
What was the catalyst? Was there something?
Pedophilia.
Oh, the issues with the church.
Yeah.
And then
was-
that's it. They had someone
and
people
it
turned
was-
away from it.
Gone. Like, everybody just went, no.
I don't want a part of that. Any part
I
of
don't
this.
want any part of this. And that goes to the vulnerability as well.
Oh, right. Yeah.
You know, these people are vulnerable, and it doesn't matter whether they're Catholic. It doesn't matter whether they're Muslim. Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It actually doesn't matter. When you put religion or any belief system as and put that on a child and assume that to be primary, you then allow that to be manipulated. You allow the child to be manipulated in ways which are not always very pretty. Your son, when you let him go and find his own truth, right? And I was allowed to go and find my own truth. And to be honest, until I was 17, 18, I did. I believed in God, but I was never a part of the Catholic Church. I was never a part of the Protestant Church. And my mother always said, go find out. You know, if you want to know what's in the Bible, it's a book. Here it is. Read it. You know, work it out for yourself. Because it's not something that these books are 2,000 years old. They're 2,000 years old, and they say and they can tell you anything you want. Anything you want.
You can derive any meaning you want from it.
You can derive any meaning you want from it. And that's where the manipulation comes in. You know?
Yeah. Well, you had some experiences when you were younger in terms of schools also, in terms of going to a specific denomination and being kind of targeted for that.
Everybody in Ireland, not everyone. So I looked up the numbers, is 88.2% of primary schools in Ireland are Roman Catholic, are assumed to be Roman Catholic. 5.4% are assumed to be Church of Ireland, which is Church of England, Episcopalian, right? And then there's 1% which are other. And then the rest of it are ran by the state. They're non-denominational. And I suppose what happens is when a child goes to a primary school in Ireland, the vast majority go to Catholic primary schools. And when they learn in the Catholic primary schools, their religion class is learning about the catechism. And they're prepared for their taking the Eucharist and taking their Holy Confirmation and, you know, preparing for confession, and they are taught about one particular denomination.
Yep.
That's their religion. Whereas the closest school to my house was, it was just down the road, and it was nominally a Protestant school. So this nominally Protestant school, my mother, we can go back in. My mother was previously a nun,
Oh, okay.
right? So in Ireland back in the day, until 1972, it's always been a secular country, but until 1972, when they amended the Constitution, the Catholic Church was given a special place within the society. And since then, we amended the Constitution to change that, to remove the special status of the Catholic Church. But my mother left the convent. The reason why she joined the convent was because the Catholic Church didn't allow married women to have jobs, right? So if you were married, you couldn't have it. You had to give up your job.
Like they had that much control over the rest of society that they could determine that.
They could determine that, yeah. And then if you were an unmarried mother, they'd take your child away.
So it was out of economic necessity that she essentially joined.
Essentially, so she was brought up in a rural area, and there was an expectation on women. They could be nurses, they could be secretaries, or they get married and have a bunch of kids. And the only other option for a woman to get a university education would be to join a convent, which is what my mother did in order to get an education. She got the education. She left the convent. And then with me and my brother and my sister, having left the convent, she allowed us to find our own religion. If we were to find religion, it was going to be on our terms. It wasn't going to be dictated to us. So since the 72 amendment, we've had, similar to Quebec, we've had what's called a quiet revolution.
Okay.
We had enshrined in our constitution in Ireland that the rights of an unborn child are equal to that of a mother. So this was dictated by who then became the Archbishop of Dublin. The Archbishop of Dublin wrote our constitution.
Really?
Yeah, and so slowly but surely, as time goes on, we've been amending it and amending it and amending it and trying to get God out of the religion, or get religion out of the Constitution. And so the upshot of that was that we still had denominational schools. So I went to a Protestant school, and within the Protestant school we had Methodists, we had Presbyterians, we had Church of Ireland, we had various denominations. So our religion class wasn't a preparatory religion class. Our religion class was looking at the differences between the different
It was
Protestant.
actually about studying it rather than practicing
It was actually about studying it rather than practicing it. And I enjoyed it. I did enjoy it because it was interesting, It was interesting, and I couldn't choose which one I wanted, which one I liked better. And it was like a whole bunch of different denominations. Like, was I going to be a Baptist? Was I going to be a Methodist? Was I going to be a Seventh-day Adventist? But regardless, everyone was saying, oh, God is real, God is real. So I had this belief in the back of my head. Whereas all the other kids that went to the other schools, they all went to the Catholic primary schools. So when I would go home, not when I would go home, because when I went home, I went I just walked across the road and I was home. But when I went to my friend's house after school, I'd be walking along with a Protestant at the end of day, and these kids out of the other Catholic schools would see us, and they would shout at us. They'd call us names. They'd throw stones at us. And this is what's instilled in children. When we prescribe a religion in a school, what we're actually doing is we're saying, you're right, they're wrong.
That's the key, isn't it? It's
Yeah.
it's breeding division.
Yeah.
And these people in the comments section who was talking about more prayer and everything like that, you can be sure that they don't want an environment where their kid is going to be exposed to multiple religions and they can choose on their own. They specifically want them to go down this path.
Yeah.
And so when you experienced that, when you saw, so you're in this position where you're learning about all different types of religions, and then you see people who are being indoctrinated into one specific religion, acting like this. Do you remember if it kind of started driving you away from religion, or like what kind of reaction did you have to that? How did you process that?
Right. So, like I say, I was religious until I was in my late teens. When I say religion, like I had a belief in God until I was in my late teens, and so what I did was I basically got the Catholic Catechism, got the Protestant Catechism, got the Church of England, Church of Ireland Catechism, Presbyterian Catechism, and I started reading about the differences, and I started to compare. I started to learn because I spoke to my mother. I spoke to my father, and they said, okay, well, let's take this and let's learn and let's grow. And I suppose it started. I started to feel pity for Catholics.
Because of how indoctrinated they were?
Yeah. Yeah, I started to feel pity for Catholics because to me, it seemed as if from reading their catechism that it seemed the overarching belief system was that they would never be good enough. You know, that they're always flawed, and that they should be guilty for everything. And I suppose one of the things that I took, being a young and an impressionable person, I started to say, maybe they're right. Maybe I should be sorry. Maybe I should feel pain, and maybe that pain should be physical. And so one of the things I used to do when I walked home from school, and I'm 10 years old.
Yeah.
I used to get my fingers and I used to rub them along the stone walls, right? And until they bled. And I would literally just say, sorry God, sorry God, sorry God, sorry God, sorry God, for 10 minutes on my walk home. And
Wow.
yeah, because I didn't understand where, like, if this God was real, if this God had a plan for me, where did I find him? Did I find him in did I find him with the crowd?
Yeah.
Or did I find him with the minorities? And if it was with the minorities, which minorities? If it was with the crowd, you know, they have to be right. You know, so I started to put guilt on myself and put pain on myself. And then I eventually, my father saw me do it.
Okay.
My father saw me do it, and I'd been doing it for months, but he was always at work, and then he came back and he saw my fingers and they were bleeding. They were just bleeding red, and he said, "What are you doing?" And he says, "I scraped my fingers along the walls just to say sorry to God." And he goes, "You're not doing that again." And that was it. He says, "You're not doing that again." He says, "If you want to say sorry to God, you'll find another way to say sorry to God."
Yeah.
But the point being is that it was a denominational school that I was in, and everybody was in a denominational school. So everybody that was around me had this belief system where they believed in God, right? And they believed in God in different ways, and they believed that one was right and one was wrong.
Right.
And it's not healthy.
Right.
It's not. And
Yeah.
so one of the things my mother did then was she said, okay, if you believe in God, we're going to send you to a non-denominational Bible camp. So during the summer, I would go and I would spend a week, 2 weeks in a non-denominational Bible camp. And I thought it was great. I thought it was great because I could go there and I could sing and I could, you know, do archery, climb walls, go rafting.
Yeah.
You know, I could do things. I could do cool things. and in the meantime, sing a few songs.
Right.
And everyone loves singing songs. You
Yeah.
know?
I mean, that's amazing. Like, backing it up for 1 second, when your mom left, because she got her education and everything like that,
Yeah.
at that time, were there any social consequences for her for leaving, or
Lots.
was she? There were a lot of
There
social.
were, there were lots. Yeah.
That makes it even more amazing for me that instead of making sure that her kids don't go down that path and holding a grudge, she actually allowed you to still choose. She would actually allow you to choose the religion that caused her suffering if you so
If I so chose.
chose on your own.
That was my mother. My mother was a very politically active
Right.
person. She was a very politically active person, and she believed in. It doesn't matter how your opinion about somebody else's opinion doesn't matter if what somebody else says to you is abhorrent. If somebody else has a differing opinion to you, the very least you can do for yourself, for them, and for humanity is to listen. Because she instilled in me by doing that, she instilled in me a belief in humanity, in the ability of humanity to learn, to adapt, to grow, to expand. And when I look at somebody now, I don't go, I don't prejudge them.
Yeah.
I go, who are you? Who are you? And what can you, how can I make you better? And how can you make me better? And what do you have to say to me? And how do I listen to you in
Yeah.
a way that makes you comfortable? And how do you listen to me in a way that I can impart upon you whatever information I need to?
Right.
Or I feel like I need to. I don't need to impart information on anybody, but sometimes I have a lot to say, you know.
Right.
And it's nice to be listened to, and it's nice to listen to people.
Right. So with your experiences and having all of these, moments, but also the opportunity to explore religion on your own, when you see something like this, when you see so many people, for example, in the U.S., pushing this so hard, saying we need to bring this specific religion into school and we
Yeah.
need to get all of our kids praying. I mean, that just must look really scary or silly. Or what is it like? How do you look at that? How do you process that?
Okay, so how do I? Right, we'll bring it back to the schools in Ireland, and I can bring
Yeah.
it back to a very recent event.
Okay.
Right, so for a decade, maybe more, it was very difficult to get children into primary schools in Ireland because there weren't enough teachers. And then there was a refugee crisis with all the America goes out and bombs Syria.
And then,
where
yeah.
did the Syrians go?
Yeah.
You know, the Syrians got to go somewhere. So they come to Ireland. You know, where did the Iraqis go? They come to Ireland. Where did the Libyans go? They come to Ireland.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying they only come to Ireland. You know,
But yeah, Europe pays the brunt of the price when the U.S. does this.
Yeah, because we're right there.
Yeah.
You know, they can't get onto a boat and go to America. They get onto a dinghy, they go to Italy, and then they try to avoid detection, or they go to Morocco, they get into Spain, and they try to, get themselves somewhere safe.
Yeah.
And it's the same in Russia. We've got like 120,000 Ukrainian refugees at the minute in Ireland.
Right.
But if you go back to the 2000s, we had in Dublin 15, right? Dublin 15 is just an area of Dublin. There were a whole bunch of schools, and majority of them were denominational. Now, what that means is you can't deny education to anybody, but you can give preference to people who are of the same religion.
Okay.
Okay, so we had a whole bunch of people coming in from Syria, from Iraq, from Libya, from wherever, right? We had very few Christians, right? And the majority of the schools were Christians, were Christian schools. So the schools in Dublin 15, they had the option to not take them.
Right.
So they didn't take them. And then you're left with the schools which are state-run, which account for a minuscule amount of schools in Ireland. And all of a sudden, all these refugee children, they have to go there,
Right.
which means that these schools then become schools for the impoverished.
Okay. And the quality starts going down with it.
Yeah, because the class numbers get bigger, the student numbers get bigger.
Right.
The strain on the teachers is more,
Yeah.
and yet these denominational schools are still getting public money.
Right.
They're getting public
Even though
money,
they're refusing.
even though they're refusing access to those who need it. You know, those who just need a hug.
Yeah.
Those people who haven't done anything wrong, they've just had their house blown up.
Right.
Like, if you look at it, Irish people, we would absolutely love to just go in and take all those Palestinian children and teach them to be, you know, as good as they can be. You know, but yet
These divisions are keeping this from happening.
these divisions are keeping this from happening. And what happens is when you segregate children, you then install in them the same sort of thing that I had when I was a kid, except this time it's not Catholic and Protestant. This time it's Catholic and Muslim.
Right.
All right, and that's what they're talking about on this video. They're saying, "Oh, we need prayers back in school." You're talking about saying the Our Father, right?
Yeah.
You're not talking about, you know, praying in the Islamic fashion.
Oh, no. It's very specific. And the funny thing too is though that particular host, he's a business guy. He has a lot of, you know, business-minded people that follow him. And they're all the exact same people who are trying to figure out why China is exceeding and excelling in different things, in technology. And meanwhile, they want to take away time from practical education in the education system and devote it to prayer. Some of them saying all the time.
Yeah.
What do they think is going to happen when they do that? They're going to be even further behind.
Absolutely,
And you know, and that kind of brings us maybe to an interesting part, which is my observations in China with religion, because they keep religion out of public life.
Yeah.
They've got places to prayer, to do your prayers, but it's very separate. And I think they're doing the right thing with it. Now, a lot of people think there's no room for religion at all, but there are designated places for the religion. There are some people who take advantage of that. Because I remember a video. I saw a video of a Muslim guy coming from, I think it was from the US or from overseas, and they were praying on a bridge somewhere in China. And they knew that they weren't allowed to do that because technically the law is you're not allowed to pray in public.
Yeah.
There are places of worship you can go to pray. And so they deliberately did that to instigate. And the police were telling them, get up, you can't, there's a mosque down there. And then it makes a great video for China anti-China propaganda where they can see them saying, oh, look, there's no religious freedom. No, these are the rules. You have specific places to pray. Now, with that said, though, I do remember when I was driving back from Qinghai to Chongqing here, and I was going through Gansu, and I was in a village, and I saw a guy praying at the side of the road. And I knew at that time, that's not actually permitted.
Yeah.
And I saw a police car coming in the other direction. I was driving my RV, and it had those lights on. And so I'm sitting in the RV, and my dad's sitting beside me, and he's like, why are you slowing down? I'm like, I want to see what happens. I said, this guy is doing something that technically he's not supposed to be doing. And there's a police car coming with the lights on. And the police car just went right by him.
Yeah.
He saw him. He didn't care. Now, Gansu has a lot of Muslim people. Maybe even the police officer was Muslim. Because I remember when we were on the highway coming back, we were counting the mosques that we saw.
Same.
You know,
Same.
we just sometimes every 500 meters, mosque. And after about 100 or so, we just stopped counting. We're like, wow, you know? But on paper, to have that rule, I think it's correct. You keep it, you've got your places of worship. There's another, in terms of Islam, I do remember another story. I've been to different mosques and I've had the chance to sit down with some of the imams and even go for meals with them. And some of them who are super religious, they're not necessarily 100% fans of the policies here, but I want to ask more. I'm like, why is that? And after discussing it with him, I got to the point where I tried to summarize his concerns. I said, so is your concern and your issue mostly that China gives you your space to practice your religion, but they don't allow you to go and expand it?
Yeah.
And he said, yeah. And so I didn't say this out loud, but inside I was saying like, that's actually kind of good.
all right.
You know,
Yeah,
that's
okay.
all right that you're not having whatever it is, Jehovah's Witnesses going around door to door saying this is what you need to believe or else you're
Yeah.
doomed or whatever it is. I was kind of like, yeah, that sounds about right. We have, as you probably know, you've been here in China a long time too. There's a bunch of churches here in Chongqing. I took my parents to one. My parents are Christian. I took them to one, to a service. And it was something, actually, they have a lot of Chinese people, overseas Chinese people in their church back in Canada. And they said, one thing you're not going to be able to do in China is you're not going to be able to go to a church service. Because a lot of, the funny thing is a lot of the most propagandized people, in terms of anti-China propaganda, are overseas Chinese people who left sometimes before the economic boom, and they just want to reinforce that they made the right decision to leave. So they make up all this wild stuff. And so they actually did go to service. The service was quite normal. We caught up with the pastor afterwards, and they had a really cool coffee shop in the basement of the church. We were sitting down with him, talking to him, and he was also telling me, that they also, because I was asking him how many services do they have, and he mentioned there's one service for Koreans also. And I said, oh, okay. So tell me more about that. And they said, well, so the Korean community in Chongqing, which is quite big.
Yeah, it's quite big, yeah.
They were looking for a place to pray. So they asked the government, and they said, oh, no problem. And they liaised with this church, and they said, can you give them a slot?
Yeah.
And they arranged it for them. They arranged a slot for them. He said, but the only thing is only Koreans are allowed to go to that service. You have to show your passport that you're not a local.
Yeah.
That kind of made sense too, because Korea has in some cases this evangelical kind of extreme religious beliefs. And for them, they said, we'll give you your space, but we just don't want that really, spreading here. People have their own beliefs here. We don't. And I think a lot of people might look at that as highly restrictive, but I think that's the right thing to do.
I do. I'll tell you my first, because I'm the same as everybody. When you first came to China, you were like, oh, this isn't what I expected.
Right, or what I was told.
Or what I was told.
Yeah.
So when I came to China, I arrived in Beijing. It was super cold and huge city. And I was like, this is 15 years ago. There were kids playing football on Tiananmen Square. And it was great, right? It was just totally not what I expected. But when I came to Chongqing, I went to a little city called Wanzhou. And my girlfriend at the time, we were talking, and she started talking about my grandmother. And my grandmother had a whole bunch of kids, like loads of them. And she was so jealous of people having a whole big family. And she said she started talking about my grandmother's religion. Find out she was Catholic. Christmas Eve, she said to me, come on, you're coming with me. You're coming with me and my auntie. And I said, where are we going? He says, I'll show you. And we went to church. we went to midnight mass.
Yeah.
We went to mass at midnight on Christmas Eve in Wanzhou, and it was huge. There was 4,000 people there, and they all went up and they got their communion and whatnot. The communion wasn't a wafer; it was an actual solid piece of bread. And then after the service, there was a big bonfire and people were singing songs and and praying around the bonfire. I didn't have a clue, and it was at that point I kind of went, okay, what I know about China and religion is wrong.
It's totally, yeah. I mean, yeah, even people who know a lot about China are surprised when they see stuff like that or hear stuff like that.
Yeah. And it's like, you can't proselytize. You can't go out and
recruit.
Like the verse in the Bible, I will make you fishers of men. Yeah, you can ignore that, because that's what we're talking about. That's putting forward that your belief system has primacy over others, and it's not inclusive, it's not fair, and it's not equal, and so yes, there are lots of Christians. Yes, there are lots of Muslims. Yes, there are lots of people of various different religions. They just can't put it in the school in front of you. They can't put it in a workplace in front of you. They can have a cross on the wall.
Yeah, but there are places of worship they can go.
Yeah.
And it's a tricky thing because, I mean, there are examples in China of what happens when you allow religion to seep into kind of public life or to shape public policy. And, well, there's examples from all around the world in terms of what it's done throughout history to create divisions, wars, whatever it is. But I have quite a few Tibetan friends, and so occasionally there are things that happen, whether it's from outside influence or different kind of disruptions in the community, and then inevitably there are controls that are put in place. There's more scrutiny on the entire community. Same thing happened in the U.S. After 9/11. For some reason, I was always screened on the flight saying, "Sir, you've been selected for random selection. Take off your shoes."
Tanned.
It's like, yeah, what is it? What is it? So whatever, it doesn't make it right, but it happens where there's more scrutiny. And when that pressure and that scrutiny happens, sometimes religious leaders, they get more kind of like, okay, no, now we're going to be really go back to our roots, our Buddhist roots. And what ended up happening is, for example, they said, okay, now Tibetans can't, harm animals anymore unless it's, or actually at all. Because I remember they were saying, one of my friends was saying that there were kids that were used to like fishing down by the river.
Yeah.
And after it was like a kind of a trickle down effect. So there were more controls. Then some of these religious leaders wanted to push back and say, now we're going to make ourselves even more religious. And they used to beat up the Tibetan kids that were fishing down by the river, saying, no, you should not be fishing for sport. And they also had where there were a lot of Tibetan people who their entire livelihood was based on yak meat.
Yeah.
They were no longer allowed to kill yaks. And the way that they did, they could just say not listen to it, but the way that the religious leaders forced them to comply was they said, when you die, the religious leaders are not going to bless your body and your soul.
Yeah.
And that is one of the most important things to Tibetans in their life. So they said, and what ended up happening was it created economic consequences for so many Tibetans that there were things that happened that are beyond your imagination. I didn't get permission from my Tibetan friends to share the story, but basically it created a lot of consequences for people. And this is what happens when you mix everyday life and society with religion, and when it becomes more extreme. Or, I've got a lot of stories about division also, about, in terms of conflicts that happen. But it's a tricky thing to manage, and you can understand why. Okay, from a policy perspective, we say that these are your places of worship. It should not interfere with public life. It should not go into public schools or anything like that. And as I said before, it seems like the correct thing to do. Now, America seems to want to go in the opposite direction, though.
Yeah, and the only reason I can think why they want to go in the opposite direction is that they want to put forward this idea of Christianity being supreme, so they can create more division. I shared with you today. There's Billy Graham's son. If you go to the Department of Education's website in America and you go to the initiatives, there's basically a call to put prayer back into public schools, because apparently we've lost something because we're not praying to some Christian God as defined by an evangelical anti-Semite from the 70s.
Right.
And I'm glad I don't have to deal with that.
Right.
I don't, like, I'm a teacher.
Right.
I'm a teacher. I don't want to have to deal with telling a child that this God is right and that God is wrong.
Yeah. And then in particular, imagine when you run into an instance where that child's parents and family believe in a different God, and you have to be in a position as an educator to say, nope, you're wrong. This is the correct God, and this is the God we're going to pray to today. I mean, it's
then what happens when, like, your children aren't my students, but if they were, then they come from my school where I'm saying this God is the correct God, and then they come back to you, and you bring those children out amongst your group of friends, your social circle, and it so happens that somebody within that circle doesn't believe in the same denomination or the same religion as what I've been saying has primacy.
Right.
It then creates a problem for you as a parent. It's taking your control as a parent away from the upbringing of your children.
Right.
And I think that's fundamentally wrong.
And taking it away from the child itself,
taking away
if
from
the
the child as
parents
well, yeah.
were the type of parents who wanted them to explore on their own and not have something
Yeah.
just shoved at them. That would be a very difficult situation to be in.
How would you then deal with your son when his Filipino friends come along? How do you then explain to him that, look, go find it, go figure it out for yourself? How does my mother then say, go find it, figure it out? Because that's what we want for children.
Right.
We want our children to be better than us.
Right.
And I don't want to make identikits of me.
Yeah.
I love teaching. I don't want identikits of me. I want each and every single student that I teach to be better than me.
Yeah, and we have to be open to the fact that maybe there is something that we believe in that is totally wrong.
Yeah.
Like, what if I got it wrong with something? Let me give my kids a chance to figure it out on their own and perhaps find something even better than the way I do things.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you think, though, with the U.S., though, perhaps some of it is tied up in an ethnic supremacy issue, too? Because obviously it's becoming more anti-immigrant, and they can't really go outright and say, okay, well, how do we exert dominance over public from an ethnic standpoint? So they choose a religious marker, which will be predominantly a particular group of people. It's the closest thing they can do while trying to exercise something as close to an ethnic supremacy goal as possible.
I think this is my opinion.
Right.
Okay, this is my opinion.
Yep.
And anyone, I'm welcome to be wrong, right? I'm welcome to be wrong. I think it's a power play. I think the amount of effort that they're putting into putting the Ten Commandments in schools and, allowing prayers in places where they're categorically not allowed by the Constitution, the complete disregard for the American First Amendment. I think it's a power play. I think that when people are brought up within a certain evangelical persuasion, they're more likely, and I've read studies on this, they're more likely to actually be susceptible to an authoritarian ruler, okay? And I think, in my opinion, Donald Trump just wants to be king.
Right.
I think that's what it is. And I think he's going to do everything to push that.
And this could be a tool to kind of accomplish that. That's interesting. I mean, I would imagine also there might be some people who just really think America has lost its way, which you can make a pretty good case for, and they think that this is the solution that will fix things. But I mean, part of the reason that America has lost its way is because of the division. So ironically, this will potentially even further create even greater divisions. So I don't know. I guess there could be a lot of different things going on, but it's a scary situation to be in, and I'm kind of glad that. Like you said, we're here.
Yeah.
I know that's going to be really hard for a lot of people to process.
Yeah.
When we're talking about, religious and ethnic conflicts or whatever it is, that you as a teacher, me as a parent here, that we're like, you know what, we're in the right place while all this stuff is going on,
And there's the other thing as well, because depending on what persuasion of religion you have, particularly if you're in America, you might just downright ignore science.
Right. Yeah.
And if you have a bunch of students ignoring science, then what's the future of your country?
Right.
Like, technology drives GDP.
Yeah.
Right. If you want a wealthy nation that's progressive, that's at the forefront of global politics, that's at the forefront of you have to do it through science.
Yeah, and there's an irony there too, isn't there? Because for these people who would be saying, why are we technologically falling behind China? Well, let's now introduce something that rejects the very science that is the pathway to that technology. You know, it's quite interesting.
They don't. People in other countries, they don't get it. And for everybody out there that's listening in another country that has never been to China, you don't get it. You don't understand the technology until you actually get here.
Oh yeah, it's out of this world, and it's always improving.
Yeah.
I mean, little things. But that sounds like that could be an entirely a big topic on its own.
Yeah.
But you know, we'll probably wrap up here. And I'll finish off because there's going to be a lot of viewers of mine who have never seen you on my channel before.
Yeah.
So you give them a little bit of your backstory. How long have you been here in China?
So I've been in China for 15 years. Been in China for 15 years. I started out, when I came to China, I went to Beijing. I was there for a little bit. And then I went to a tiny little city just outside of Lianyang called Ganyu. I loved it.
Yeah.
It was so small. There were 2 foreigners. It was me and another Irish guy.
Just by coincidence.
Yeah, no, the 2 of us went together.
Oh, okay.
And it was me and another Irish guy, and so yada yada.
Oh, is that the guy who's gone up to Hangzhou now?
No, he went to Canada.
Oh, okay.
He's a different guy.
Okay.
Different guy from Clare. He went off to Canada, and I had a round the world ticket. I was not staying in China. I had just taken a redundancy in the middle from the financial crisis, and I just came here to waste time, really.
Yeah.
And I just fell in love with it.
Yeah.
I didn't fall in love with Beijing. I did fall in love with Ganyu, and then I said to myself, right, I've got to get somewhere bigger than Ganyu, but smaller than Beijing. And so then I found myself in Guangzhou, and I was in Guangzhou, which is it's a tiny little city in Chongqing. There's only 2.5 million people in it, and nobody's ever heard of it. It's it's half the population of Ireland.
Yeah.
And so I was there for 11 years. And then I came to Chongqing city, the big city, about 4 years ago. I'm teaching in primary school.
Yeah.
I have the mind of a 10-year-old child. And so it's...
Well, you're the champ at pub quiz also. Absolutely unstoppable. And so many people there. We had your birthday celebration not too long ago. A lot of people showed up, and a lot of them said that if you were ever to leave Chongqing wouldn't be the same. So you've become a pretty important part of the community.
I don't take compliments too well, but on my birthday, when I went into shots, I honestly was going to get a beer and go home.
Yeah.
Oh my God, how many people were there? It was unbelievable.
Oh yeah. They were all there for you. But yeah, no.
I love this city. I love this city. I love this country. And I'll probably die here.
Yeah.
You know, and
I have a hard time imagining leaving China also. It's just it's the right place. And I know for a lot of people who are listening from outside of China, that might be really hard for them to process and to think how's that even possible. But you know, I think we're going to have many other topics to talk about. So thanks for joining me on this. We'll wrap it up here, and we'll catch you guys next time.
Bye-bye.
Peace.